my distinct pleasure, help me welcome Michael Corley.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. Kind words. Well, good morning, everybody. I tell you, it's an absolute pleasure because to look around the crowd, I know so many faces in here, and so I'm honored and flattered. You obviously didn't know who was speaking today when you came here, but I'm grateful and I appreciate it. First question, is anybody in the witness protection program? I guess you wouldn't raise your hand, would you? Okay, I asked that because we're videotaping this for training purposes only. All right, like Dave said, and I got to tell this story. So Corley Company, very simple name, not rocket science there. You probably know why I named it that. But GenXLeaders.com is my blog site. And why Gen X Leaders? I was on the treadmill one day, and I'm listening to the podcasts, and they continue talking about these dadgum millennials, right? Everything's about the millennials. Are there any millennials in here? Okay, out of respect, we got one. All right, so I can talk about you. And I'm going, hey, we grew up listening to all about the boomers, and now we've got the millennials. What about us Gen Xers? We're this whole group that are really taking over management and leading organizations now because of our age, 35 to 50. So I hopped off the treadmill, GoDaddy.com, and I started searching for names, and GenXLeaders.com was available, and I bought it, and then it was like, oh, great, now what do I do with it? So I turned it into a blog, and it's still a work in process. We just came off the holidays, so I thought I would share a few holiday photos from the Corley family over the last couple weeks. We always like to get together over Christmas season, and the family just absolutely loves each other.
Can we turn off the spots?
Oh, yes. Is it glare? You got glare on there? Okay. No, that's fine. So, is that better? Any better? Is it?
It's the spotlight right here. It is the spotlight from the projector that you see. It's not these.
Okay. Is it these? Yeah. We'll continue to work on that. No, that's fine. Got to be flexible.
I got to figure out which one it is, though.
As long as it's not a strobe light.
Sorry, Michael.
I feel like I'm in a disco.
There you go.
But now you can't see him. There we go.
That's a positive. We know what he looks like.
I'll just get closer.
It's all good.
All right, we'll work with it. Oh yeah, where were we? I was sharing my family Christmas photos, and everybody came together. The long-lost relatives came in and brought bearing gifts with their kids, and of course we sat around for dinner, and everybody got along. Not dissimilar to the Waltons' dinner, where family comes from far and near. And I'd be willing to bet everybody's Christmas was like this, right? Not quite? Well, of course not. And our holidays weren't like that. And I had to weave in the Norman Rockwell photo because Heather thought that was hilarious when I shared it with her a while ago. But life is just too complicated, right? It is not like that. It's not simple anymore. It's just darn complex. And that's the purpose for today's discussion, is how can we look at 2016 to simplify things in our lives, particularly as business leaders, so that, you know what, life just isn't quite as crazy as it normally is. But to get to the root of the problem, we got to figure out what are the causes of the complexity. What do you think the causes of complexity are? Anyone? This is audience participation. Technology?
Or just putting more on yourself than you need.
More? Yes. Yeah, what else? Need to make decisions? That's pretty complex, right? Too many choices, lack of understanding, lack of clarity and expectations. Anybody who's in business, which is everybody in here, that's a big problem with our employees, with our superiors, the lack of understanding, the expectations. Change, and how much change is going on nowadays? It's continual. In the old days, and when it was simpler, there wasn't the rate of change as there is nowadays. Fear causes complexity, the fear of change. Need for perfection, information overload, too many tools, all those things. Every day there seems to be a challenge of the tyranny of more. And this is exactly what you said, is every day is all about more, right? So business leaders, more projects, right? Everything's about a more project. One more meeting. Well, let's get with this group. Let's meet with this client. Got to have more revenue, of course. Why? Because that's what we were brought up to do. Doesn't mean it's better revenue, just means it's more revenue. We all want more employees because it's kind of a feather in our cap, or the work may dictate it. Obviously increases complexity. And I got to talk about this more board memberships. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. As a business leader, you're going to be asked to be on a number and serve on a number of boards. And the greatest gift you could probably give to those boards is to say no if you can't go and be heavily involved with it. We'll talk more about that later. More is not better. So let's stand right here and say more is not better, and I give you permission to stop. Stop with the more. And let's look at 2016 as a year of simplicity, and let's celebrate that, and let's walk in with that mindset, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we do that. Interesting, as I was preparing for this talk, I did a little research on simplicity, and this is not new. This whole concept of simplicity is not new. If we go back Confucius even talked about it. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complex. And it's true, we insist on making it complex. Plato talked about the beauty and style and harmony, and grace and good rhythm depend on simplicity. And my good friend Socrates, beware of the barrenness of a busy life. And yet we continue to try to be busier all the time. I hope, maybe one of us on our epitaph, it'll say this. It says he was a simple man, right? So I got a question. You all came here today to hear something. Why do you want simplicity? It was in the title of the talk, Less is More, Simplicity in 2016. Why might we want simplicity? Peace of mind. Yeah. Sorry?
Less anxiety.
Less anxiety. Health. Less stress.
Greater focus.
Focus. Excellent. Enjoyment. Yeah, it's almost one of those, if you just take a step back and take a deep breath with life, like, oh, thank goodness. Because life is good, but boy, if you can make it a little more simple, it's a little bit more enjoyable. So let's talk about some ways. Now, I'll preface these next, there are 9, with a few things. Probably nothing in here is rocket science that I'm going to tell you. And most of these you will have heard of before. But sometimes as leaders, we need to take a step back and do a gut check and be reminded of what's important, what are some tools we can employ to be more effective. And then we can expound upon those. So prioritize and focus. It's a new year, so how many people? Not very many. How many have quit those New Year's resolutions? Yeah, we joke about that. But as leaders, we need to have priority and focus, and we need to have goals and objectives. Otherwise, what will happen? We'll be all over the place. And so what I encourage you to do is pick 3 or 5. Some people say 7 to 10. I'm big into simplicity. Pick 3 or 5 goals that you want for 2016, whatever they are. Right? So now it gives you some semblance of focus. Make sure your goals are aligned with your roles. So what does that mean? How often have you talked to some young millennial who wants to be president of the company? All right, everybody? Of course. And we were in that situation not too terribly long ago. And yet, every day at 5 o'clock, they leave the office to go work out. Well, what's the problem there? Their roles and goals are inconsistent. How many times is there somebody who wants to aspire at work to a greater position, and yet they go out and they socialize Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, and come into the office dragging a little bit the next day? Roles and goals are misaligned. So as you look at your goals, you got to make sure your roles in life support that. We all go through different phases in life depending on where you are, right? At some point, sometimes family takes a little bit more of a priority. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's whatever the case may be. And it depends on the phase of life, whether you have kids, whatnot. But the best thing you can do when it comes to goals, I've found, is make sure your roles are aligned and then jettison the other stuff or put it into perspective. On a daily basis, right, we talk about, oh wait, I got this thing here. Identifying your tasks and priorities each day. Beginning of every day, what are the top 3 to 5 things you need to get done? If you have a running list, you probably have 100 of them. Maybe not that many, but you got a lot. We got a lot going on. But what are 3 to 5 each day? And how do you come up with those 3 to 5? Remember the Pareto principle? The 80-20 rule? Who knows what the 80-20 rule is, everybody? Right? 20% of your employees do 80% of the work, 20% of your revenues come from 80% of your revenues come from 20% of your clients, right? Well, how about looking at your tasks that way? 20% of your tasks will accomplish 80% towards your goals and objectives. Because there's probably a lot in there that isn't overly important or isn't a priority on that day. So just a little tip to help you prioritize your day. And just get them done. Just discipline yourself to get them done at the end of the day. Keep a list. Oh, great, Corley, that's not rocket science. No, it's not. But how many people don't keep a list of things that need to be done? And so what happens when you don't keep a list? What's that? It doesn't get done. You wake up in the middle of the night going, oh gosh, I've got to do that. You're in a meeting, a very important business meeting, in the back of your head you're going, I got to drop off the dry cleaning. So you lose focus. By having something as simple as a list and prioritizing that list, you free up your brain, your bandwidth, to focus on the task at hand, the discussion at hand. We all like checking them off, gives you a sense of accomplishment. So many of us are in the service industry, and so sometimes it's tough to get a sense of accomplishment each day. And so why not check off the list? Gives you a sense of accomplishment. And of course, write down the task you didn't put on your list, and when you do it, you check it off, right? That's always a lot of fun. Every day you reprioritize. Great way to start the day or end the day is prioritize what needs to be done. And it's just a matter of discipline in doing it. We get in a hurry in the mornings, we race out of the house, and right off the bat, if you don't have your priorities set, you're really operating behind the 8 ball. And use a tool. And it's okay if you want to use paper. How many people still use paper lists? Why? Because it works. It works. That's absolutely right. I have tried every to-do list known to man on the internet, and I have settled on Wunderlist, but I have tried everything, and what I found I was doing is spending more doggone time trying to learn the tool than it was to implement and use the tool. And so find the tool that works for you, and it could be paper, and that's okay. Best piece of advice, one of the best pieces of advice I ever gotten was not only do you keep a to-do list, keep a not-to-do list. Because how many times will you get torn and dragged into doing things you don't normally want to do because you're a nice gal, you're a nice guy, and it's a friend, or it's a behavior. And you know what? Because when something happens and there's urgency, you'll default to what the norm is. And so things you need to stop doing and things you shouldn't be doing. If you can do that, that alone will help you immeasurably. And I'll give you an example of mine. So I've got a client I spend a lot of time with on Tuesdays. And I found myself always trying to squeeze in a breakfast or a lunch on Tuesdays. And why would I do that when the rest of my week is fairly flexible? Why would I do that? Because that's what met the needs of the people I was meeting with. Tuesday seemed to be a good meeting day. Well, now, I don't meet on Tuesdays. And if I do, it's because there's an exception and I've consciously made the decision to do it. So what should you stop doing today to help free you up to focus on the to-do items? I encourage you to think about that and put it on your list. Keep a separate list. Control your calendar. It's a mindset. If you don't control it, what happens? Yeah, somebody else will control it. No matter where you are in the organization, whether you're the leader or not, somebody will control the calendar for you, family, friends, or whatnot. If you commit yourself to controlling your calendar, you're ahead of the game. Remember those priorities we just talked about? Schedule them. Put them on your calendar. So many of us become beholden to our calendars, and that's what guides our day. Hopefully, use it as a resource and a tool to guide your day. Block off time for those tasks to put them on your calendar. This is something I started doing not too terribly long ago, maybe in the last couple of years, and scheduling 1 to 2 weeks at a time. If we go back to that to-do list, it's pretty long, right? And we've got a lot of conflicts, challenges. And instead of looking at things in the snapshot of 1 day at a time, look at your week, which is probably pretty normal for us to do, but look at 2 weeks. If you start looking at 14 days time frame versus the 7, or 10 versus the 5, depending on how you look at it, it really gives you a broader perspective and frees up time to do things that you wouldn't normally think you had to do, and allows you to schedule those to-do items. So looking at 2 weeks at a time, and do a rolling 2 weeks. Make sure you budget adequate time for completion. How many meetings are you sitting in and somebody's late to it? A lot. They didn't budget their time right. How many times have you budgeted a meeting for an hour and you know doggone well it's going to be an hour and 15 minutes? Lunch meetings. Lunch meetings, right? They're always scheduled from what? 12 to 1. Well, you probably have to leave it, especially nowadays, leave at 11:30, right? And what time will you get back to the office? Yeah. If you're lucky, yeah, 1,000. I'll be generous, say 1:30. But the reality is, especially nowadays in season, it's going to take a lot longer. And so if you budget from 12 to 1, your calendar gets filled up at 1, you're already behind. And then chaos ensues, and think about the people that you're meeting with. I love this one. Absolutely love this one. I've just started doing it, and that's build in margin in your schedule. Monday morning, crazy, right? In the office, meetings back to back to back. So you might have a staff meeting, team meeting, one-on-one meetings. And how are those typically scheduled? On the hour. Everything's on the hour, right? Thank you, Outlook. That goes back to when Outlook was originated. And for how long does it default for? An hour. Every meeting's an hour, right? Which is probably a good thing because our attention spans don't go much longer than that. But how many times do you have a meeting 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, lunch 2 to 3? You probably have days like that, or multiple days like that. And I see the nods. When do you do your follow-up? When do you do the work that you need to do related to that meeting? Build in margin in between those meetings. Take 15, whatever works for you, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever the case may be. Block it off in between meetings, and it will allow you to be more focused into that next meeting because you're not thinking about what you just exited. And if you do that throughout the 2 weeks we talked about, you'll find your life will be a little bit more simple or less chaotic. This is just an absolute passion/pet peeve of mine. You've got a regularly scheduled meeting, meaning once a month you meet staff, let's say staff, or let's say a client. And because it's an important client, you want to meet with them on a monthly basis. You meet with him or her or the group, and then what's the last thing you do as you're leaving? Well, let's schedule the next one. Or, what do you say? I'll email you, and we'll schedule it. Well, dadgummit. So now, and we'll talk about email in a second. So now you've created the complexity of having to reach out to this person again, interrupt them, back and forth on emails to schedule another meeting that you know doggone well you're going to have next month. Put them on the calendar throughout the year. Particularly any type of work groups internally, if you're working on specific projects, get them on the calendar. Always easier to take them off the calendar than it is to put them on the calendar. Plus, a little secret, if you cancel those meetings, people will love you for it. But get them on the calendar, otherwise you will spend more time trying to schedule the next meeting than the actual meeting itself, it seems like, and the chaotic aspect of that. particularly if it's people outside your company. It becomes a little bit more complex. If you're leading work groups or any consultants, that becomes a challenge. And for kicks, for the next 2 weeks, track your time. 15, 30-minute increments, nothing crazy. You can do it on paper or keep it on your Google Calendar or in Outlook. But interesting, track your time for 2 weeks and see where you're spending your time. If you've never done this, you may be really surprised where you spend your time. And be honest, put in goofing off reading the paper, reading the paper, watching TV, whatever you do, admin. And you'll be surprised at what the opportunity is to become more efficient and to simplify things in your life. All right, batch your work and limit distractions. And I've become a big believer in this recently, in batching your work, because we are so pulled and torn, particularly leaders of organizations. And if you're managing other people, you're always torn and pulled by the other people. And so when do you get your work done? How do you focus your work? Well, batch it. And what do I mean by that? It means put on your calendar 30 minutes to do emails, and do nothing but emails in that 30 minutes. And then don't check them again until your next scheduled time. What that allows you to do, a couple things. Means throughout the day you don't have to think about, oh my gosh, I got to check my email, I got to respond to Corley, he sent something. You know you're going to get to it at a scheduled time. For your people, they'll start to learn your habits. And if you're in a position where you've got people reporting to you, you can share with them, I'm only checking my emails 3 or 4 times a day, whatever. Works for you, right? It's different for everybody. But it allows you to focus on the emails and do just emails and nothing else. Phone calls, same. If you're big into phone calls, batch your time. Client visits, if you can, right? And all this is as business needs dictate and allow. Employee meetings, so batch the time. If you have your one-on-one meetings, what I've found is if you have them all on the same day, it allows for consistency, continuity, and your frame of mind in having those meetings. Now, if you got 20 people, that may not work. All right, so turn off notifications. Who's guilty? All right, who's checked their phone so far in here? Yeah, I wouldn't expect otherwise. So we got 3 honest people, right? How many emails are that important? Man, and I heard this just the other day, and I'm going, as I'm listening to this podcast and I'm checking my emails, what emails are important nowadays? I mean, honestly, are urgent? Not too many. Not too many at all. If somebody wants you badly enough, they're going to text you, call you, whatever the case may be. And so if you turn off those notifications, it won't buzz when you're trying to get your work done. Your social media notifications. I learned how to turn those off the other day because, damn it, I had done something, and every tweet, every Hootsuite, everything was zipping in my pocket, and every time I was trying to talk to somebody, engage in an important discussion, it would go off. It became a distraction. Close your screens. So many of us leave multiple screens open, right? The email screen, several browsers open. It's okay if it's for work purposes, but that email screen, every time it pops up, what happens? Every time an email comes in, boop. And so what do? You stop. And now you're distracted. And we've all heard of the studies that it takes X number of minutes to get back on task, and I don't know what's real. I think it's probably less than what the studies say. But the fact is now we're distracted. Now, I will tell you, if you try this, you will go through withdrawal symptoms. You will panic for the first few days. It is tough. But once you get in that rhythm, you'll appreciate the ability to focus more. Multitasking and focusing on a specific task. Now all the studies are coming out. Remember about 10, 15 years ago, at least for us Gen Xers and Boomers, it was very cool. They're saying, oh, you can multitask now. You can do twice as much as you can. Well, studies are now saying there's no such thing as multitasking. And maybe some of the millennials, they say, can multitask, but the way most of us were raised, it's just not possible. People got kids. So this is how I tested it. And they're millennials or younger. I don't know what generation that is. Try talking to them when they're texting. They can't multitask. They don't hear one word you say. Try that with your spouse just to validate the age group. They don't hear a word when they're typing away the email. You can't multitask. So stop trying. So if you go back to focusing, what John said earlier, it's about focus. The one way to do that is to stop multitasking. And of course, put time on your calendar. Set time on your calendar to do all the things we talked about. Meetings. And I'm absolutely passionate about effective meetings because so many of them are a waste of time. Does anybody agree? Yeah. So why do we go to meetings? Ever thought about that? We hate them.
Just schedule another meeting.
Just schedule another meeting. That's good, yeah.
Everybody on the same page.
Everybody on the same page, communication, and get work done. Well, look, we're in a collaborative environment now, so the reality is, how can you get anything done collaboratively if you don't meet with people? And I think that's kind of here to stay, right? That we got to have meetings. And so, as leaders, our job is to make them as effective as possible and efficient. So, basic meeting rules, you can go, yeah, but I challenge you to employ this over the next couple weeks. Have a defined purpose for the meeting. If there's no reason to meet, cancel it. Again, like I said earlier, you'll be an absolute hero with your staff and with whomever you're going to meet. Because how do you feel when somebody cancels a meeting on you? Sometimes pretty good. Great, I didn't want to go to that anyway, and now I've got an extra hour, right? Because every meeting is an hour, we talked about earlier. Schedule the meetings. And when you schedule them purposefully and use tools to help you schedule them. Nothing more frustrating than, hey, what time do you want to meet? Well, I'm open from blah, blah. And, the emails are back and forth. If you're all in the same system, you got Outlook, you can use a calendar. Google, you can use a calendar. There are tools like Doodle that help you schedule, give people the option. There are a number of tools out there that simplify the scheduling process. If you got people that aren't tech savvy, or say they aren't, although Doodle's pretty easy, write the email and use a table and give options of times and just say reply and check when you're available to meet. This is if you're sending to one or multiple people. Make it simple on the person and people you're trying to schedule the meeting with. Otherwise, your life gets complex because the emails go back and forth. Obviously, set an agenda. Do we set an agenda and send an agenda for every meeting? Maybe, maybe not. I would encourage you to do so even if it's the same agenda every week, even if it's an agenda template. And the reason for that is it shows you're serious and we're going to this meeting to have a purpose and you've taken the time to create the agenda. And so use a template. On that agenda, put start and stop times for each agenda item. Right? Because you got probably 4 or 5 different types of people in each meeting. The one that doesn't say a word. And I'm thinking more of larger meetings now, 5, 10 people. You always got a couple people that they're not going to talk no matter what, right? Then you got the 1 or 2 that never shut up no matter what. And so as they're reporting out, they will, if you assume that they're going to take 5 minutes, they'll take 10 or 15 minutes. And what happens then? Besides the time, people start losing interest. Now they start checking their emails because they don't want to listen to whomever it is, blabber on. If you put times on the agenda, as a leader, you can easily say, okay, we're running out of time. You can counsel that person beforehand that you've got 5 minutes. It gives you a tool to move along. Notes and minutes, depending on the importance of the meeting, and every meeting's got a little different level of importance. But send out notes afterwards if it's appropriate. Again, use a template. Make it easy on yourself to send out notes, especially if there are to-do items. Gives you a method and an opportunity to track that and lets people know you're serious. And then I'll go back to build margin in between meetings so you can do that stuff. If you're racing from meeting to meeting, it really becomes difficult at the end of the day to go back and review your notes and then have to send them out. We live in a world of trade-offs. And what's a trade-off? Yeah. When you change one thing for another, or when you make a decision, that means you're making a decision not to do something, right? Everything we do is a trade-off. There's so much going on in our lives, we can be busy every minute of the day with something, And so if you don't look at every decision as a trade-off, it really becomes stressful. And so that's what makes the roles and goals in your life so important and your tasks for the day so important, so you can make those decisions, those trade-offs that are helping you progress towards where you need to progress and feel comfortable about it and less stressful about it. Saying no to people isn't fun, but if you have a reason to say no, at least it helps you be more comfortable with it. And I love this one. Sunk cost. Who knows what sunk cost is? Yeah, money you've already spent, or time you've already spent on something. You've worked on that project for months with a team of people. Something changes in the marketplace, or you realize that really wasn't a good idea. How many organizations, how many people will continue to push through because we've invested all this money and time into it? But knowing that the results won't yield anything, you continue to push forward. There are any number of examples every day on sunk cost. And if you can get comfortable with this concept of, well, that's a sunk cost, jettison it and move on. Very, very difficult to do. Particularly as a leader when you got people going, well, I've been in that darn meeting, that darn meeting we've been meeting every week for months and months and months, and now you're saying it's off? Well, sometimes that's the best decision for the organization, for the people. It's a sunk cost. You chalk it up as a sunk cost and you move on. It's a trade-off. You're trading the future for something better based on the information you have at the time. Systematize things. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I had this crazy notion I wanted to start doing triathlons and do a half Ironman. There was one problem. I didn't own a bike, and I had never really ridden a bike. So I'd go out and do the whole thing where I bought a bike, go through that whole process. And when I first started, it was taking me about 20 minutes to get from my room to on the bike and out, right? So I had to get gloves, helmet on. I had to go through that whole, what do I need? I need my nutrition, blah, blah, blah. After about 2 or 3 weeks, it was down to about 5 minutes. And when I realized, when I thought about it, I go, I have absolutely systematized and routine this process. And so it taught me that if you create a routine and follow that routine, you're going to save an incredible amount of time. But more importantly, it becomes simple. I no longer had to think about it. It was just habit. And so if we look at that on our daily basis, what are things that we can systematize? What routines can we systematize? Getting up in the morning, breakfast, whatever. You know, Steve Jobs always wore the same clothes, and that's because it was easy for him. You got people who eat the same thing every day for lunch because they said, I don't even want to think about it. I want the same thing every day for lunch. I think some of that's kind of crazy, but if that's what floats your boat and that's what helps you be better and simplify your life so you can focus on the things you need to focus on, then do it. Oh, going corporate. How many people work for smaller organizations, entrepreneurial type organizations? Yeah, and your employees go, oh great, policies and procedures, we're going corporate, damn it, we're going corporate. Well, there's a reason we do that. It's because on those things that are routine, why would you not standardize and create a process so you never have to think about it again? Onboarding a new employee. If you do that once every few months, it's a kind of a pain because it's not standardized. If you don't write it out, you're kind of winging it. It's very complex, very distracting. But organizations that hire a bunch of people, it's like this, clockwork. They got a list, boom, 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 boom. They standardized it. I would challenge any leader, if you can standardize as much as possible within your organizations, those things that are routine, that aren't I won't say important, but aren't where you need to be creative in your thought. Do it because it becomes more efficient, and more importantly, you don't have to think about it. Then you can spend your brain power on the creative things that you need to do and the strategic planning you need to do. There are any number of tools and resources out there. Don't reinvent the wheel. How many times have you had somebody go, I'll produce that report to you, get all that data for you, and then they go back and they start pulling information and they spend hours and hours and hours. You go, well, we did that report 2 months ago. all you had to do was update it. They're reinventing the wheel. It's not necessary. And with the tools out there, it's just not necessary to do it. And outsource. We talk about that in our lives and at work. To the extent outsource what isn't the core to your lives or to your business. It simplifies things. And I think our challenge, I know as leaders in this room, is we know we can do everything. Given enough time, I bet everybody in this room, you can do anything you want to do. But is it worth your time to do that? Is it worth your time to cut your grass? That's always a simple example. Is it worth your time to create that marketing brochure? Something you need to think about, because it takes bandwidth. Even if you can do it, it's the bandwidth, the mental bandwidth and the distraction. Okay, email. Face-to-face is ideal, right? And then the phone, and then we get an email because that's what we do. And so a few tips on email that I've learned, and if we could do this, boy, life would be so much more simple. Good subject line, always have a subject line. Most people do that now. A good subject line. If you need a response, subject, right? Make it easy for the recipient of the email to understand which action you want. Think about that. Make it easy for them, because you're asking them to read one of, 100, 200 they get a day. And even if you got the fancy title of president behind your name, yeah, it may rise to the top of the email reading list, but still you're battling all the other distractions. 3 to 4 sentences top. My gosh, please. They don't read this. Nobody reads the second paragraph. Maybe if you're doing a State of the Union type of email for your organization and you ask them, please read this. 3 to 4 sentences tops. State the action you needed, even in the body, and don't leave room for misinterpretation. I've noticed this a lot as we've gotten more casual with email, particularly with the younger folks, is they don't review them before they send them. Let's don't even talk about the grammatical and the spelling errors, which I think show a lot about people. But then you read and you go, I honestly don't know what they're trying to ask me. So then what happens? Email back. Would you please clarify, what do you want? And so now you're 2-3 emails back and forth. Take the time as you send an email to review it before you send it. Is it clear? Should it be clear to the recipient, knowing that you've got biases because you wrote the email? CC means just that. If you're in a position in an organization where you can dictate, say, look, if you copy me on an email, doesn't mean I'm going to read it. Yeah, I know you're just doing it to cover your butt, or you want an FYI. You don't have to. Well, whatever rules in the organization, just make it clear on what the purpose of CC is for. And of course, the proverbial reply all. I put that up there. Good luck getting people to stop that. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Well, I'd like for it to, because so much of it is just nonsense. And of course, review before sending. Remember, on email, the attention span is very, very short. That's why it goes back to 3 to 4 sentences. And if you can see this, it says the start and the finish line are about 100 yards apart in a race. Run for people with short attention spans. Very, very short. Okay. Learn to say no. Probably the best advice, hopefully I can leave you with today, is learn to say no. You will be asked to do more and more and more as leaders, particularly as you rise up the organization, as you start organizations. Everybody wants your time. And that's flattering, and it's appropriate, and you want to give them your time. The reality is you've only got 24 hours a day. Hopefully you spend 7 of those sleeping, the time for family, friends, and so it leaves very, very little time outside of your goals and objectives in the areas you're focusing on. So say no to meetings. If somebody doesn't have an agenda, a purpose for the meeting, say no. No to events. In this town, you go to an event every night this time of year, right? And the ability to say no frees up some time for you, takes the stress off, and makes things a little bit more simple for you. Board of directors, which I talked about earlier, I firmly believe everybody should serve on a board of directors and contribute to the community. 5 boards of directors? More than one's probably pretty tough depending on your work schedule and time, but you will be asked. You're going to be asked. Again, it's flattering, right? And you want to do it because you want to help them out. But it'll be, if for everybody who's been on a board, you know that last day that you serve on the board and you come off, you're like, oh, thank goodness. Well, maybe you shouldn't have been on because of your time commitment. Unsubscribe from email lists. I'm big into this right now because I've subscribed to everything because I think it's kind of cool. You get the free download, you get the free information, and the next thing you know, you're on this email list, which isn't bad. People are, that's what they do, and they're sharing good content and good information. But when you have 30 or 40 of these in a given day, and you're just delete, 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 delete. You know what? It feels good the first 5 deletes. You're like, yeah, and then after that. So I just unsubscribe. It's become real easy too as well. Magazine subscriptions, you know, same thing. Everybody gets the free or the $1 magazine subscriptions, and then so what happens? You get all these magazine subscriptions and you stack them up right on your desk, and then the stack gets higher. And then every time you look at it, you're stressed. Going, I got to read this. I paid for this. I got to do this. And so if you unsubscribe from it, then you don't have the stress of doing it. I was notorious with that with the Wall Street Journal forever. Damn, that thing, that takes a long time to read. And know the relationships with people who will bring you down, right? Nobody in this group, that's why you're here, but there are enough people that will bring you down. And not intentionally, it's just they're downers. Just avoid them. Life is way too short. We got 80, 85 years on this earth. Why hang around people that are going to bring you down? If they're a relative, you know, like Clark on Christmas vacation, you know, not Clark, Uncle Eddie. But the reality is people will bring you down, and they will love your ear. Just try to avoid them. Say no to them. And I love this cartoon. So even the dogs know. I actually know more commands than I respond to, right? They know to say no. Remember, simplicity isn't natural, nor, I don't know if it's nor or. Any English people, nor easy or easy? Simplicity isn't natural. Or, okay. I thought I had nor at first and I took it off because it'd be neither nor either. Yeah, okay. Simplicity isn't natural or easy. It's not. It's not easy. That's why we have to be intentional about it. And what this says is, you know, because we're busy. And so you got these cavemen saying, no thanks, we're too busy. He's lugging a box of rocks on a square tire. And this guy's got the solution. He's got a wheel, a round wheel. But we get too busy to take a step back. All right, so we're going to end on a few simplicity maxims. I just like that word maxim. I heard it the other day. I thought, oh, that's kind of cool, right? Complexity has the momentum. Its pursuit must be intentional. You got to want to do it. And it really is a mindset. It's a mindset, and only you can control your simplicity. Nobody's going to control it for you, because every individual that we interact with creates complexity, whether they intend to or not. More does not equal better. You must minimize and prioritize in order to simplify. Lack of clarity causes misunderstanding, which increases complexity. Got to work on. And work and life require trade-offs. Accept this, and you can achieve a simplicity mindset. So I ask you, how do you keep it super simple? Anybody? Yes.
Before 8:30 or after 5:30, no communication in the office.
Whoa.
It's dark time, it's quiet time. And if you have a major project you're trying to work on, you get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, you've got an hour and a half where nobody's coming in with a cup of coffee or at the water fountain or any of that stuff. So we found that was really helpful.
Excellent. Everybody hear that? 8:30 to 5:30 is the work gets done, right? And then after that, before those hours, you can work, but people aren't going to, no communication. Just it's there just to get the work done. And how was that transition when you did it?
At first, it was like people would start to want to come, you know, they were used to coming in and sitting down with a cup of coffee. And after that, people go, ah.
Yeah.
It took a lot of stress away from the people. And if you really had to get something done, you really were productive during that time.
That's
because you
great.
knew that was your time.
Yeah.
So,
Great idea. How else? Yes.
I want to give Danny credit for this one. On our membership committee, when we have our minutes, she action items, highlights them in red, and who's responsible for them.
Ah.
It's like boom, boom, it makes us who have to follow up, keeps us in line, keeps it straight.
Great
and
idea.
It does simplify it very much for us.
Yeah. Great idea.
Danny idea.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
This is tough, because you have to have the confidence, I think, with your boss sometimes to set the parameters.
Yeah.
I have a boss who emailed at midnight
Yeah.
and had to sit him down and say, you will not get a response from me before 8:30. And, well, it went better than I thought it would.
Good.
But you have to set those parameters.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is tough when you've got bosses that have different operating schedules and different perspectives. Yeah, but you coached them through it, so that's great. How else? Yes, ma'am.
I have a card I carry in my calendar.
Oh,
And so when someone calls and says, would you do this? And I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to do it. I literally pull it out and run my finger over.
that's great. Everybody see that? She's got a no card. That is great. Yeah. And you know, I don't know if you're, Greg McEwen wrote a book, Essentialism. I don't know if you all have read it. I've listened to it a couple times. Fascinating book. You know, if it's not a heck yes, then it's a heck no. You know, so if it's not a heck yes, if it's not something you absolutely get fired up and want to do, then your answer should be no. Or you should contemplate it being a no. Yeah, that's great. Anything else? How you simplify things? Yes.
Following up on this, no. When you said when someone asked me to do something, you went like this with your hands. That's sensing our second brain and trusting the gut. Because it's not an intellectual exercise to prioritize. When you sense it in your gut,
good.
learn, communicate with that, and trust it, really helps rise to the top what you want to do and should be doing. If it's not in your gut, the answer is probably no.
Yeah, that's a good point. How else? Any other tips, tricks we can share with our fellow leaders? Any questions? Greg?
Delegate. If you can delegate, delegate.
Yeah.
I find that to be huge. If I can have somebody else do it, or take the time to train them so they can do it.
Yeah.
It lets me multitask.
Absolutely. Well, you can't multitask. You can do other things. But delegate's great. You know, again, it goes back to we can do everything. Given enough time, we could learn how to do, well, I was going to say brain surgery. I mean, I could learn how to build a motor, given enough time. I think we've all got the intellectual capacity to do that. It just becomes, does it make sense to do it? And like Greg said, if it doesn't make sense to do it at your level, you delegate it out. Then you have to go through the clarity of the, you know that type of explanation, which is a whole nother discussion on delegation, but a great point. Anything else? All right. Well, I want to thank you all. And if you have any ideas or thoughts, send an email to Heather. How about that? How about that? Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much.
Oh, you're
On behalf
welcome.
of the Lions, the board, thank you so much for being
You're welcome.
here this morning.
Good job. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.